The 4 a.m. wake up. The rooster crows. Father and son go to work in the fields, while mother stays behind to clean and cook. Milking cows, tilling soil, hunting, all necessary for the family lifestyle. After a light dinner, it was to bed early, to rise early all over again. However, by 1900, this was already becoming old-fashioned America. By 1880, New York City already had over 2 million people. But in 1890, both Philadelphia and Chicago could boast over 1 million to their growth. While most of the growth could attribute to immigration, almost half of the influx came from America's own rural backyard. Young men and women drawn by economic opportunity, independence, and the city life that was waiting for them, however, was neither glamorous or encouraging. It had been recorded in one instance that 17 people from multiple families lived in an area of 5 meters by 4 meters. The glamour of city life soon faded in the eyes of the beholder. Not many can fathom the change of a 200-acre farm to this. Due to the immigration of so many people, the cities often constructed too quickly the houses into raced rows. Instead of dirt roads, there were traffic jams. Instead of roosters, there was the noise of the slums. Most people who came did not live in ramshack housing, but apartments and tenements. The most infamous of these was the dumbbell tenements, in which dozens of people could share one floor of space with a communal bathroom. No privacy, no solitude, just strangers. If the housing was terrible, then the work to pay for housing was appalling. Before labor laws, before government interference, 12-hour workdays were not only mundane and tiresome and for little pay, but dangerous. Industries like cotton called for hot conditions only worsened by the arrival of a steam engine. Machinery lacked fencing as the workers were exposed to all of its moving parts. Children were employed to crawl under such machines and pick away the fallen cotton. What followed was the highest death rate in American factory history, most of which was children. The meat industry, butchers formed assembly lines, and the fast pace and long hours led to exhaustion, and exhaustion led to mistakes. As butchers made a miss here and a miss there, unfortunately, they had carved up their own co-workers. Missing limbs were not an uncommonality in Gilded Age America.
It wasn't long for civilians to find out that only a few people were wealthy while the majority were poor. This wide difference in social class called for an explanation and justification, none the least of which widely used was social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is based off Darwin's theory of evolution, in which organisms that survives will be the one who will prosper and their future will be secure. Businessmen in the Gilded Age took this idea and turned it into social aspect. As quoted by the Englishman Herbert Spencer, that the strong will survive and become successful, while the weak will become poor and unsuccessful, which is also known as the survival of the fittest. With this theory of evolution, business soon found a meaning in monopolies and growth, rather than playing small ball. Like this idea that bigger business would succeed and would last through the economy long after small business will run out. The American government even supported the theory by the use of laissez-faire, in which the government will not get involved with business feuds and economic conflict. Wealthy men like J.D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie promoted the idea that God gave them more intelligence and work ethic to be able to handle wealth than that of the poor, on which the poor lacks of hard work and intelligence kept them from becoming like them. Even the Christian Church prosecuted the idea that hard work, diligence, and submission to the authority display the present salvation and faith in Christ, the connection that the people need to work hard with the help of God in order to be successful, otherwise known as the Puritan work ethic.
The weak and the poor who were tossed aside by so many men in power had more issues than just getting by in the slums. Remember the dumbbell tenements? In 1879, the law required such housing to add at least one window for ventilation. Unfortunately, the windows purposed for ventilation became used for dumping waste. Convenience reared an ugly head as soon the air in the housing became unbreathable. Many residents moved from inside living to rooftop living. In the summertime, the heat would become almost unbearable. Most infants died of heat stroke and heat exhaustion, and something unknown to doctors. Even if healthy all around, no family in these situations avoided malnutrition, the all too common problems with no food, like vitamin deficiency and physical weakness. Tap water and city supply reeked of pollution. Diseases like smallpox, influenza, leprosy, and cholera were among just a few to rapidly spread among the lower classes. Unsanitary conditions and close quarters further catalyzed their spread. Yes, subpar health was a common reality, accepted by most who survived it. It's hard to imagine anyone seeing a bright side in these dark hours. But Americans and Europeans alike, during the most troubling times, made do by embracing their culture with which they brought to the city.
Due to the rapid growing upper and middle class, the desire for amusement and the business that came with it was more in demand than ever. One of the most popular forms of entertainment during the Gilded Age was amusement parks. Amusement parks, set up just outside major cities, emerged to meet this new economic opportunity. These parks reflected the mechanization and efficiency of industrialization while serving as a source of fantasy and escape from the stress of living in the city and life itself. Also becoming very popular in the 1860s was American burlesque. Derived from the elements of Victorian burlesque, it is a literary, dramatic, or musical work intended to cause laughter by caricaturing the manner of spirit of serious works, or by ludicrous treatments of their subjects. These stellar work of art eventually evolved into feature-ribald comedy, such as lewd jokes and female striptease for adults. Along with entertainment growth come educational growth. More and more Americans were supporting tax-supported public education as they come to accept that government could not effectively function if people continued to be ignorant. Throughout the Gilded Age, compulsory attendance to schools started to be required. Additionally, the number of high schools also increased. Before the Civil War, only a few hundred tax-supported high schools existed. By 1900, there were about 6,000 high schools. Furthermore, new immigrants in the urban areas strengthened the Catholic parochial schools, causing the schools to be a major part of the nation's education structure.
With entertainment and education emerging, another great pastime found its way to the lower classes: politics. It was in politics that education could grow, politics that the people could voice their opinions through nominees. Every election was always close and had a high turnout from the voters. The issue with politics, not just in the Gilded Age, but more so than others, was corruption. Gilded Age politics was pockmarked with bribes left and right. Treasury Department officers, the Naval Department, Secretary of War were all caught in scandals. Most notable, however, would be the Vice President to Ulysses S. Grant, Schuyler Colfax, whose involvement with the Union Pacific Railroad created the Credit Mobilier scandal. The shady firm chosen by Colfax shielded the railroad from investigation in return for stock and bribes on the railroad. The most infamous, crooked, unarguable establishment in politics was the Tammany Hall, a $3 million Democratic political organization that became very problematic. Neither party would support or pursue ambitious agendas. Led by Boss Tweed from 1865 to 1871, there was no doubt Tammany Hall was a crime-ridden place full of thieves. In their time, the Tweed ring would swindle anywhere from $75 to $200 million from the city of New York. It wasn't until his downfall by Thomas Nast in 1875 that corruption would at least slow down to a dwindle.
Even though urbanization throughout the Gilded Age brought many negative effects such as the ones mentioned earlier, it would lie to say that there was not a single positive in the mix. Many new technologies were invented throughout the Gilded Age that we couldn't fathom living without. Between 1860 and 1900, 440 patents were issued. One of them was the telephone by Alexander Bell. The invention of the telephone made it more convenient for people in the cities to communicate to anyone long distance. As equally revolutionary was Elisha Otis's elevator innovation. Otis came up with the design that had a safety brake added, which all other elevators lacked at the time. Years later, more than half of the major cities' buildings had an elevator in them. More importantly, the elevator made building and construction easy and safer to go higher. Arguably the greatest invention during the Gilded Age was the light bulb, invented by the one and only Thomas Edison in 1879. The light bulb revolutionized the way the American worked. It made for longer working hours, leading to more production, a better economy, and an industrial powerhouse in America. It also made the streets safer by providing better vision and eliminating dark alleys, where city culprits could no longer dwell in darkness from the long arm of the law. Ultimately, we wouldn't be living the same if not for these great Gilded Age inventions. All in all, the time of Gilded Age is, and will forever be, the beginning of the modern United States of America.